Welcome to the Vault of Lost Tales podcast.
Ever think about those iconic Wild West images? Buffalo Bill Cody, riding across the plains. Of course you have.
It's hard not to. That image is so ingrained.
Exactly. But have you ever stopped to think about who actually crafted that image? The storytellers behind the legend.
That's a great question, because it wasn't just Cody himself.
Not at all. Okay, let's unpack this, because today on the Deep Dive, we're diving into the, frankly, incredible life of one of those key figures, Colonel Prentiss Ingraham.
Ingram, yes.
Yeah.
A fascinating character in his own right.
Absolutely. We've got some great sources here that really shine a light on his adventures, his link to Buffalo Bill, and we'll even get a little taste of his writing style.
And we should probably also cover his later years, the end of his story, too.
Yes, definitely. We'll look at how his quite eventful life concluded. So let's start at the beginning. What do the sources tell us about his background?
Well, what's immediately striking is just how much happened in his own life even before the writing. He was born near Natchez, Mississippi, December 28th, 1843. Son of a clergyman, Reverend Joseph Holt Ingraham, and his mother was related to Phillips Brooks, the famous preacher. So a reasonably privileged background.
Right. Not exactly roughing it on the frontier from day one.
Oh, not at all. He was privately tutored, went to St. Timothy's Military Academy, Jefferson College in Mississippi. He even briefly attended Mobile Medical College.
Huh. Military school, college, a bit of medical training. Seems like he was exploring different paths.
He was, but then, the Civil War happened, and that really threw him into the thick of things.
Right. That changed everything for a lot of people. What was his involvement?
He served as a lieutenant in the Confederate Army Witter's Mississippi Regiment of Light Artillery. Became a commander of scouts in Ross's Brigade, Texas Cavalry.
So frontline action.
Definitely. He was wounded and captured at Port Hudson, but then, true to what seems to be a theme in his life, he escaped.
Already escaping capture. Okay, so the war ends. Does he settle down? I have a feeling the answer is no.
Not even close. This is where his life reads like one of his own dime novels, frankly. Seriously, what happened next?
Okay, get this. He fights with Juarez in Mexico against the French. Serves in the Austro-Prussian War. He was at the Battle of Sadowa in 1866.
Wow. Okay.
Then he fights in Crete against the Turks. Then joins the Khedive's army in Egypt. It just keeps going.
This is unbelievable. Mexico, Austria, Crete, Egypt.
And Cuba. He became a colonel in the Cuban rebel army, even a captain in their navy.
A captain in the Navy, after being in the cavalry.
Apparently so. But then, disaster strikes again. He's captured by the Spanish as a filibuster, basically an unauthorized military adventurer, sentenced to death.
Oh no, not again.
But you guessed it, he escapes.
Again?
This man's life is just escape after escape.
Yeah.
It's hard to fathom how much action he saw firsthand.
It really is, and you have to wonder, how did all these incredibly intense real-life adventures shape his writing later on?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? All that danger, the different cultures, the military strategy.
Right.
It must have given him a unique perspective.
You think so? It's hard to imagine it didn't profoundly influence the way he wrote about adventure and conflict, the authenticity maybe, or just the sheer scale of what was possible.
Absolutely. So, okay, how does this globe-trotting soldier of fortune become the guy writing about Buffalo Bill in the American West? That seems like quite a shift.
It does. Well, the sources say he met William Frederick Cody Buffalo Bill in 1879.
Right.
But here's the really interesting part, the twist. Ingram had already been writing novels about Buffalo Bill for 2 whole years before they actually met.
Get out. Really? He was writing the legend before he even knew the man.
That's what the sources indicate. Think about that. He was tapping into the public's fascination, maybe using newspaper accounts or rumors, and building this fictional persona.
Wow, that says a lot about the power of stories and maybe the hunger for heroes back then. He was helping create the demand he would later supply. In a way.
Precisely. It speaks volumes about the late 19th century celebrity culture starting to emerge, especially around figures from the West. Ingram saw the potential, saw the interest.
And Buffalo Bill was the perfect vehicle for those kinds of stories, even based on secondhand info.
Exactly. And then once they did meet in 79, they apparently hit it off, became good friends.
So the relationship became real.
Yes. And Ingram even worked for a time as the press agent for Buffalo Bill's Wild West show.
Okay, so you have the real frontiersman and the guy who was basically his literary architect working together. That's a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. The man who lived it and the man who wrote it collaborating.
Now, about that writing? He wasn't just writing a few stories, was he?
Oh, no, not at all. The sources are clear. He was astonishingly prolific. He started his literary career properly in London around 1869.
Okay.
But when he came back to New York, he really hit his stride, especially writing for publishers like Beadle and Adams.
Ah, the famous dime novel publishers.
The very same. They churned out these cheap, accessible paperbacks, the mass market entertainment of the day, and Ingraham became one of their star writers.
Prolific feels like we're underselling it. What kind of numbers are we talking about?
Well, he himself claimed by 1900 to have written over 600 novels.
Sandra.
And some estimates, looking at his total output, push that number closer to maybe nearly 1,000 novels.
1,000? How is that even possible?
Apparently, his speed was legendary. They say he could write a whole half-dime library novel. These were shorter in just a day and a night.
Wow.
And a longer dime library novel in about 5 days. And get this, all in longhand, he didn't use a typewriter.
Writing a novel in longhand in 5 days, that's just mind-boggling discipline. Or maybe sheer desperation to meet deadlines.
Probably a bit of both. It certainly shows his dedication, but also just the enormous demand for this kind of fiction. People couldn't get enough of these adventure stories.
And he knew how to deliver them.
Yeah.
Consistently. It wasn't just banging them out. He clearly understood the formula, what readers wanted.
Exactly. He tapped into that cultural desire for thrills, for stories of the West, pirates, adventure, whatever the popular taste was, he could seemingly write it.
And to manage that kind of output, he didn't always write under his own name, did he?
No, not at all. He used a whole host of pseudonyms. The sources list quite a few. Dr. Noel Dunbar, Dangerfield Burr, Major Henry B. Stoddard, Colonel Leon Lafitte.
Wow, that's a lot.
Frank Powell, Harry Dennis Perry, Midshipman Tom W. Hall, Lieutenant Preston Graham, the list goes on.
It's like he had multiple writing identities. Any reason why? Just to write more, or?
It was pretty common practice back then, especially in the dime novel industry. It let authors write for competing publishers without issues, maybe try different genres.
Okay. That makes sense.
And sometimes the lines got really blurry. Apparently, some novels first published under the name Captain Alfred B. Taylor were later reprinted as Ingraham's work.
Interesting. So attribution was a bit fluid?
It could be. And there are also claims, quite strong ones, that he actually ghostwrote some of the novels that were published under Buffalo Bill's own name.
Really? So Cody might not have written all of his books.
It's quite possible Ingraham penned some, or even many of them. He also apparently wrote one novel credited to J.B. Omohundro, another Western figure known as Texas Jack.
Man, the layers here between the real person, the public image, and the writer creating that image. It's fascinating.
It really complicates our idea of authorship and celebrity in that era, doesn't it?
It does. Now, besides the, 1,000 or so novels, did he write anything else?
Yes, he also ventured into playwriting. Our sources mention at least 3 plays.
Okay.
There was Love and Duty, performed around 1885. And interestingly, it was apparently produced under both his real name and a pseudonym, T.W. King.
Huh. Covering his bases there, too.
Seems so. Then there was The Gambler's Wife in 1887 and The Boy Ranger in 1891.
So he was reaching audiences through the theater as well, trying different formats.
Exactly. It shows a certain versatility, adapting his storytelling for the stage, which was, of course, another hugely popular form of entertainment back then.
Okay, so we've talked about his life, his incredible output. Let's get a feel for the style of these adventures he was writing. You mentioned an excerpt.
Yes, from a story called The Flying Phantom, or The Pirate's Secret. It gives you a good sense of the pace and excitement.
All right, set the scene for us.
Okay, imagine this. There's a sleek yacht, the Flying Phantom. It's being chased, hunted down, by a cutter called the Mermaid. They're trying to escape through this really narrow, dangerous channel.
Okay, sounds tense already.
It is. What jumps out right away is that relentless pace, the focus on immediate danger. You hear calls about the water depth getting shallower and shallower.
Like a countdown to disaster.
Exactly. The text mentions calls like 20 feet, then quickly down to 15, then 10, and finally a heart-stopping 5 feet.
Ooh, cutting it close. You can feel the ship scraping the bottom almost.
Precisely. It really ramps up the suspense. You can almost picture the characters on deck, the captain shouting orders, the pursuing ship getting closer.
And how does it resolve? Or does it?
Well, in this snippet, they make this audacious move. They kind of feign surrender, letting the mermaid get really close, and then make a desperate last-ditch effort to escape. It's pure swashbuckling stuff.
Huh. Classic adventure trope. Fake surrender, then bam, take a break for it.
Exactly. You can totally see why readers would just eat the stuff up. It's nonstop action and suspense.
Yeah, it really highlights his skill in building that tension, crafting those really vivid action sequences, whether it was pirates or cowboys. He knew how to keep you turning the page.
That seems to be the key. That ability to create immediate peril and then these thrilling escapes, it was clearly his trademark.
So, an incredible life, an incredible writing career. But like all lives, it had to end. What do the sources tell us about his final years?
Well, it's a bit more somber, as you'd
Yeah.
expect. For a long time, he'd suffered from an old foot wound he received, presumably during one of his many military campaigns.
Yeah.
And apparently, he had this sort of fixation on it. He actually expected that that wound would eventually be what killed him.
Interesting psychological element there. But that wasn't the case.
Not directly, it seems. In 1903, he went to see a doctor in Chicago. The doctor told him, "Good news, you won't lose your foot."
Which must have been a relief for him.
You'd think so. But then the doctor delivered the bad news. He had Bright's disease.
Ah, a serious kidney disorder, right? Often fatal back then.
Yes, exactly. And the doctor, rather strangely perhaps, linked it somehow to the old foot wound. He gave Ingram about 6 months to live.
6 months. After everything he'd survived. That's rough. Did the prediction hold true?
Not quite. He actually lived for another 8 months, slightly longer than the doctor expected.
Shows that resilience again, maybe?
Perhaps. He spent those final months in retirement, seeking treatment at the Beauvoir Confederate home down in Biloxi, Mississippi.
Beauvoir. That's the place Jefferson Davis lived after the war, isn't it?
That's the one. It later became a home for Confederate veterans.
So, a quiet end in Mississippi.
Relatively quiet, yes. He passed away there on August 16th, 1904. He was survived by his wife and 3 children.
August 1904. It really is a contrast, isn't it? That quiet end compared to the absolutely packed, adventurous life he led.
It is. Almost seems like the final chapter belonged to a different book entirely. But it does suggest, maybe, that even someone who lived such a large life sought some peace at the end.
That makes sense. So, wrapping this up, we've journeyed through the life of Prentiss Ingraham, a real-life adventurer, soldier, escape artist.
And then a staggeringly prolific author who became instrumental in shaping the legend of Buffalo Bill, even starting before he met the man.
It's an incredible story. His own life was arguably as exciting, if not more so, than the tales he wrote.
And it really makes you think about that interplay between lived experience and popular myth-making. How much did his real adventures bleed into his fiction? And how much did his fiction shape the public's view of Cody?
That leads to a great question for you listening right now. Consider how Ingram's own wild experiences might have colored not just his stories, but the whole perception of the American West for his readers.
Or maybe think about this. What does it tell us about fame, about storytelling, when someone can build such a powerful image of a person they haven't even met yet, just through words?
Really interesting points to ponder. Ingram's work is a window into that era, into how legends were made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
His dime novels, his Buffalo Bill stories, they really capture the popular imagination of the time.
So if this dive into Prentiss Ingram's life has sparked your interest, definitely try and seek out some of his work. See those adventure formulas in action.
It's a fascinating slice of American literary and cultural history.
It really is. And remember, this deep dive was put together based on the sources and topics you're interested in. If there's another subject, another set of documents you want us to explore.
Let us know. We're always ready for the next deep dive.
Absolutely. Until then, keep exploring.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below.